The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Flight AA-2473 prepared for takeoff from London Heathrow Airport. Among the passengers settling into their seats was Michael "Big Shaq" Thompson, a former Royal Air Force pilot turned successful businessman. At 6 feet 4 inches with broad shoulders and a gentle demeanor, Big Shaq, as his friends called him, had always stood out in a crowd. Today, he was simply looking forward to a quiet flight home after closing a major business deal. The takeoff went smoothly, and the first hour of the flight passed without incident. Big Shaq had just dozed off when the aircraft suddenly lurched to one side. The overhead oxygen masks dropped, and a wave of panic swept through the cabin. Through the commotion, a flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, her usual professional calm barely masking the urgency in her tone. "If there's anyone on board with flying experience, please make yourself known to the cabin crew immediately." Big Shaq's heart raced as he pressed the call button. Within moments, the head flight attendant, Mrs. Chen, was by his side. Her face was pale as she explained the situation. The captain had suffered a severe medical emergency, and the co-pilot was struggling to maintain control of the aircraft while managing all systems alone. "I flew Typhoons for the RAF for 12 years, Big Shaq said quietly, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Chen's relief was visible as she quickly ushered him toward the cockpit. The scene that greeted him was grim. The captain was slumped over in his seat, while the co-pilot, whose name tag read Rodriguez, was visibly overwhelmed trying to manage everything alone. The aircraft was cruising at 36,000 feet, but warning lights were flashing across the instrument panel. "I'm here to help," Big Shaq announced, his training kicking in as he assessed the situation. The co-pilot nodded gratefully, and together they began working to stabilize the aircraft. 2 flight attendants carefully moved the captain from his seat, allowing Big Shaq to take position. The next few minutes were crucial. Big Shaq familiarized himself with the Boeing 777's controls, different from the military aircraft he was used to, but the basic principles remained the same. He and Rodriguez quickly established a rhythm, communicating in short, precise terms as they worked to ensure the safety of the 300 passengers behind them. They had to make a decision quickly. With 4 hours of flight time remaining to their original destination, they needed to find a closer airport for an emergency landing. The weather was deteriorating, adding another layer of complexity to their situation. "Dublin is our best option," Rodriguez suggested, already pulling up the airport's approach information. "We have enough fuel, and their emergency services are top-notch." Big Shaq agreed, his mind already running through the emergency landing procedures. As Rodriguez coordinated with air traffic control, Big Shaq addressed the passengers through the intercom, his voice calm and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Thompson speaking from the flight deck. Due to a medical emergency, we will be diverting to Dublin Airport. We have the situation under control, and your safety is our top priority. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The next 2 hours were a testament to human resilience and teamwork. While the situation in the cockpit remained tense, Big Shaq and Rodriguez worked seamlessly together, supported by the professional cabin crew who kept the passengers calm and prepared for landing. As they began their descent into Dublin, dark clouds loomed ahead. The wind had picked up significantly, making the approach more challenging. Big Shaq's experience with difficult weather conditions during his military service proved invaluable as he and Rodriguez carefully navigated through the turbulence. Every minute felt like an hour as they methodically worked through their landing checklist. Emergency services were standing by on the ground, their lights visible even through the rain that had begun to fall. The passengers held their breath as the aircraft made its final approach. The landing gear deployed with a reassuring thud, and Big Shaq's hands remained steady on the controls. The runway lights pierced through the rain, guiding them home. With decades of combined experience between them, Big Shaq and Rodriguez executed a textbook landing, the aircraft touching down smoothly despite the adverse conditions. As they taxied to a stop, the cabin erupted in applause. The immediate danger had passed, but Big Shaq and Rodriguez remained focused until the aircraft was completely stationary and properly secured. Only then did they allow themselves to exhale, the weight of what they had just accomplished finally sinking in. Medical teams rushed aboard to attend to the captain, while aviation authorities began their preliminary investigations. As Big Shaq finally stepped out of the cockpit, passengers lined up to thank him, many with tears in their eyes. But for him, it wasn't about being a hero, it was about doing what needed to be done when it mattered most. The hours following the emergency landing in Dublin unfolded like scenes from a movie, but for Big Shaq, it felt surreal. As emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft with their lights flashing against the rain-slicked tarmac, he found himself in the airport's operations room, giving a detailed account of the events to aviation authorities. The news about Captain Parker, the original pilot, hit hard. Despite the medical team's best efforts, he hadn't survived the massive heart attack that had struck him mid-flight. The weight of this information settled heavily on everyone's shoulders, particularly Rodriguez, who had worked with Parker for the past 5 years. He was more than just a colleague, Rodriguez shared quietly during a break in the debriefing. He taught me everything I know about flying these birds. Big Shaq placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, understanding the complex emotions that come with losing a mentor. Meanwhile, the story had caught fire across social media. Amateur videos taken by passengers showed the tense moments when the oxygen masks deployed, and the subsequent smooth landing in challenging weather conditions. News helicopters hovered around Dublin Airport, trying to catch glimpses of the aircraft and the man they were already calling the guardian angel at 36,000 feet. Mrs. Chen, the head flight attendant, had given her own statement to the authorities, praising both pilots' professionalism. The passengers never knew how challenging the situation really was, she explained. Mr. Thompson and First Officer Rodriguez worked together as if they'd been flying partners for years. Back in the terminal, passengers were sharing their experiences with news outlets. A young mother held her baby close as she spoke to reporters. "We didn't know what was happening at first, but when we heard Mr. Thompson's voice over the intercom, something about his calmness just made us feel safe." Her baby, who had slept through the entire ordeal, now gurgled happily in her arms. An elderly passenger, who had been seated near the cockpit, recalled the moment Big Shaq had first entered. "You could feel the shift in energy," he said. "Even through our fear, we knew we were in good hands." The airline's crisis management team had arrived from London, handling the logistics of accommodating stranded passengers and arranging alternative flights. They also had to manage the growing media presence, as journalists from around the world descended upon Dublin Airport, eager to cover the story of the businessman-turned-hero. Big Shaq, however, was uncomfortable with the attention. During his RAF days, he had learned that the quietest professionals were often the most effective. When asked about his actions, he consistently redirected praise to the entire crew. "I just happened to have the right experience at the right time," he would say. The real heroes are the cabin crew who kept everyone calm, and First Officer Rodriguez, who remained composed under extraordinary pressure. The investigation team had begun their preliminary analysis of the flight data recorders. The readouts confirmed what Big Shaq and Rodriguez had reported: the sequence of events, the decisions made, and the textbook execution of emergency procedures. The aviation authorities spokesperson would later comment that the incident would likely become a case study in successful emergency management. As evening approached, Big Shaq finally had a moment to call his family. His wife had already seen the news and had been trying to reach him. "I'm fine, love," he assured her, his voice finally showing signs of fatigue. "Just another interesting day at the office." Her relieved laughter on the other end of the line brought the first real smile to his face since the whole ordeal began. The airline's CEO had flown in personally to meet with Big Shaq and Rodriguez. In a private meeting, he expressed the company's profound gratitude and offered to arrange immediate transportation home for Big Shaq. However, Big Shaq had one request before leaving: he wanted to attend Captain Parker's memorial service. He was the real captain of that flight, Big Shaq insisted. His years of maintaining a well-trained crew and establishing clear emergency procedures helped save all those lives today. The medical investigation revealed that Captain Parker had shown no previous signs of heart problems. His last medical checkup, just 2 months prior, had cleared him for flight duty. This revelation sparked important discussions about expanding cardiac screening protocols for airline pilots. As the day drew to a close, Big Shaq sat alone in his hotel room, finally allowing himself to process everything that had happened. His phone was filled with messages from old RAF colleagues, business partners, and even a few marriage proposals from admirers who had seen him on the news. He smiled tiredly as he scrolled through them, his mind already drifting to the lessons that could be learned from today's events. In his RAF days, they had always emphasized that success in emergency situations came down to 3 things: training, teamwork, and keeping a level head. Today had proven that these principles held true whether you were flying a fighter jet or a commercial airliner. As he finally lay down to rest, Big Shaq's last thoughts were of gratitude, for his military training, for the skilled professionals he'd worked with today, and for the strange twists of fate that had put him on that particular flight at that particular time. The following days brought a whirlwind of activity that Big Shaq hadn't experienced since his most intense RAF missions. The story had captured the world's imagination, leading to an overwhelming number of interview requests from major news networks. However, Big Shaq's focus remained on something more important: Captain Parker's memorial service. The service was held in a historic church in London, its ancient stone standing in stark contrast to the modern jets flying overhead. The building was filled to capacity with airline staff, family members, and aviation professionals. Big Shaq sat quietly in a middle row, trying to blend in despite his imposing frame. Rodriguez sat beside him, both men dressed in formal dark suits. Captain Parker's wife, a dignified woman with silver hair, spoke about her husband's lifelong passion for flying. Tom never saw it as just a job, she said, her voice steady despite her grief. For him, every flight was a privilege, every passenger a responsibility. Her words resonated deeply with everyone present, particularly the pilots in attendance. After the service, Mrs. Parker approached Big Shaq. Their meeting was brief but profound. "Tom would have been grateful," she said, squeezing his hand. "Not just for what you did, but for how you've handled everything since." Big Shaq, usually composed, felt tears welling up in his eyes. Meanwhile, the aviation industry was already implementing changes sparked by the incident. The airline announced enhanced medical screening protocols for all flight crew members, including advanced cardiac monitoring. Other airlines worldwide began reviewing their own emergency procedures, using the incident as a catalyst for improvement. The flight data analysis had revealed something remarkable. During the emergency, Big Shaq and Rodriguez had managed to implement complex procedures while dealing with deteriorating weather conditions, all without a single deviation from safety protocols. Their performance was being studied by aviation experts as an example of exceptional crisis management. Back home, Big Shaq tried to return to his normal routine, but things had changed. His business colleagues treated him differently, not with awe, but with a new level of respect. They'd always known him as a successful businessman, but now they saw the depth of experience and character that lay beneath his modest exterior. One morning, while having coffee at his favorite local cafe, Big Shaq overheard a young boy telling his father, "I want to be a pilot like Big Shaq." The child's father explained that being a pilot meant more than just being brave, it meant being responsible, prepared, and always putting others first. Big Shaq smiled quietly behind his newspaper, appreciating the father's wisdom. The incident had sparked discussions about airline safety across the industry. Aviation authorities were reviewing procedures for single-pilot incapacitation, using the successful outcome of this event as a benchmark. Training programs began incorporating more scenarios based on real-life incidents, including this one. Mrs. Chen, the head flight attendant, had become an advocate for enhanced crew training. In a conference presentation, she discussed how the seamless coordination between flight deck and cabin crew had been crucial to the successful outcome. It wasn't just about having a qualified pilot available, she explained. It was about how everyone worked together under pressure. Rodriguez had returned to flying after a brief leave of absence. His first flight back was emotional, but he felt stronger for the experience. He often thought about the lessons learned during those critical moments with Big Shaq in the cockpit. Sometimes the most important decision is knowing when to accept help, he reflected in a crew debriefing session. The airline's investigation team had compiled a comprehensive report that would influence aviation safety for years to come. They highlighted the importance of passenger manifests, including professional background information, something that had helped identify Big Shaq's flying experience quickly during the emergency. As weeks passed, Big Shaq received an unexpected invitation. The Royal Air Force wanted him to speak to their trainee pilots about his experience. Initially reluctant, he agreed after realizing the value his story could bring to their training. Sometimes the skills you learn in one context can save lives in another, he told the eager young pilots. Never stop learning, never stop preparing. The impact of the event rippled through society in unexpected ways. A children's book author created a story about teamwork and courage based on the incident. Airlines began discussing the possibility of creating a database of passengers with aviation experience who would be willing to assist in emergencies. One evening, while watching his young niece's school play, Big Shaq reflected on how life could change in an instant. The children were performing a story about everyday heroes, and he could see how the next generation was being shaped by stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The incident had also affected Big Shaq's business approach. He found himself emphasizing emergency preparedness and cross-training in his company's operations. Success in any field, he would tell his employees, comes down to being ready for the unexpected and working together when it matters most. 3 months after the emergency landing, Big Shaq found himself standing in front of a packed auditorium at an international aviation safety conference in Geneva. Despite his initial reluctance to speak publicly about the incident, he had come to realize that sharing his experience could help shape the future of aviation safety. The conference room fell silent as he began his presentation. Rather than focus on the dramatic aspects of the story that the media had sensationalized, Big Shaq spoke about the small details, the importance of clear communication between crew members, the value of regular emergency training, and the need for quick but methodical decision-making under pressure. In those crucial moments, he explained, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about falling back on training, trusting your team, and following procedures. His words resonated with the audience of aviation professionals, who understood that safety often came down to these fundamental principles. During the conference, Big Shaq reconnected with Rodriguez, who had been promoted to captain following his handling of the emergency. Their reunion was warm, both men having formed a lasting bond through their shared experience. Rodriguez had implemented new training protocols for his crew, incorporating lessons learned from that fateful day. You know what I remember most? Rodriguez shared over coffee. It wasn't the technical challenges. It was how you kept everyone focused and calm. That's something they don't always teach in flight school. Big Shaq nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In crisis situations, emotional stability could be as crucial as technical expertise. Back home, Big Shaq's business had evolved in unexpected ways. His company had started a foundation focusing on emergency response training for various industries. The foundation's first project involved creating virtual reality simulations for crisis management training, using the lessons learned from the flight incident as a framework. One day, while reviewing the training materials, Big Shaq received a letter that touched him deeply. It was from a teenage girl who had been on the flight with her grandmother. She wrote about how the incident had inspired her to pursue a career in aviation, not for the glory, but for the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. The letter reminded him of his own journey. As a young boy growing up in a modest neighborhood, he had watched planes soar overhead and dreamed of flying. His path from the RAF to business and then to that crucial moment on Flight AA-2473 hadn't been straight, but every experience had contributed to his ability to handle the crisis. The airline industry had undergone significant changes in the months following the incident. New protocols were being implemented globally for identifying passengers with aviation experience during check-in. Airlines had also enhanced their medical screening procedures for flight crew, potentially preventing similar emergencies in the future. Mrs. Chen had been promoted to head of cabin crew training for the airline. She often used her experience from the flight in her training sessions, emphasizing the importance of staying calm and professional even in the most challenging situations. "When passengers see us remain composed, they find strength in that," she would tell her trainees. The impact extended beyond aviation. Business schools began using the incident as a case study in crisis management and leadership. They analyzed how the combination of technical skills, emotional intelligence, and teamwork had turned a potential disaster into a story of success against the odds. One evening, while mentoring young entrepreneurs, Big Shaq shared something he had never told the media. In those first few seconds after entering the cockpit, he admitted, "I was terrified. But I remembered what my RAF instructor always said, courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs to be done despite your fear." The story had also sparked changes in public perception of airline safety. Rather than causing fear, the incident had highlighted the multiple layers of safety protocols and the professionalism of airline crew members. It showed that even in the most extreme circumstances, training and preparation could make the difference. Captain Parker's legacy lived on through a scholarship program established in his name, providing opportunities for aspiring pilots from underprivileged backgrounds. Big Shaq had quietly become one of the program's main supporters, seeing it as a way to honor the captain's memory and contribute to the future of aviation. During a family dinner, Big Shaq's young nephew asked him if he missed being a hero. His response reflected the wisdom gained from the experience. "The real heroes are the people who prepare every day for emergencies that might never happen. They're the ones who make sure we're ready when we need to be." The incident had created a ripple effect of positive change throughout various industries. Companies began emphasizing the importance of transferable skills and cross-training their employees. The idea that expertise in one field could prove valuable in unexpected situations had gained new recognition. As Big Shaq concluded his presentation at the aviation conference, he shared a final thought that captured the essence of everything he had learned. In life, as in flying, the most important decisions are often made in split seconds. What determines our success isn't just what we know, but how we use that knowledge when it matters most. 6 months after the emergency landing, Big Shaq stood at the entrance of a newly established flight simulation center in Manchester. The facility, part of his company's initiative to improve emergency response training, was unlike anything the industry had seen before. It combined virtual reality technology with traditional flight simulators to create immersive training scenarios based on real-life incidents. The center's first group of trainees included pilots, cabin crew, and even professionals from other high-pressure industries. Big Shaq watched as they went through their paces, noting how the lessons from Flight AA-2473 had been woven into the training protocols. The simulations didn't just focus on technical skills, they emphasized the human elements that could make or break a crisis response. During one session, a young trainee pilot faced a scenario similar to the one Big Shaq had encountered. After successfully managing the situation, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "I always wondered if I'd be able to handle something like that," she confessed. "Now I know it's not about being fearless, it's about being prepared." The impact of the incident had spread far beyond aviation. Hospitals had begun implementing similar crisis management training, recognizing that the principles of clear communication and decisive action under pressure were universal. Big Shaq found himself consulting with emergency room doctors, sharing insights about how to maintain composure during life-or-death situations. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing training data at the center, Big Shaq received an unexpected visitor. It was the air traffic controller who had guided Flight AA-2473 to its safe landing in Dublin. They had never met in person, but their voices had remained etched in each other's memories. "You know," the controller said, sharing a cup of tea in Big Shaq's office, "that day changed how we approach emergency situations in air traffic control too. We've revised our protocols, making them more adaptable to situations where civilian expertise might need to be utilized." The conversation sparked a new initiative. Big Shaq worked with aviation authorities to create a database of professionals with relevant emergency skills, not just pilots, but doctors, engineers, and other specialists who frequently flew. The system, while voluntary, would help airlines identify potentially valuable resources among their passengers. Meanwhile, Rodriguez had become a vocal advocate for mental health support in aviation. His experience dealing with the loss of Captain Parker while maintaining professional duties had highlighted the importance of psychological resilience in the industry. He regularly spoke at conferences about the human side of aviation incidents. Mrs. Chen's training programs had evolved to include psychological preparation alongside technical skills. In any emergency, she would tell her students, the biggest challenge isn't just following procedures, it's maintaining the human connection that keeps people calm and cooperative. The story had taken on a life of its own in popular culture. A documentary filmmaker approached Big Shaq about telling the full story, not just of the landing, but of the changes it had inspired across industries. Initially hesitant, he agreed when he realized it could serve as an educational tool for future generations. During the filming, Big Shaq returned to Dublin Airport for the first time since the incident. Standing on the runway where he had landed the plane, memories flooded back, not of fear or danger, but of the extraordinary teamwork that had made the landing possible. The airport had installed a small plaque commemorating the event, but what touched Big Shaq most was learning how the local community had been affected. Dublin schoolchildren now included the story in their lessons about citizenship and responsibility, focusing on how ordinary people could make extraordinary differences in others' lives. Captain Parker's widow had become an advocate for preventive health screening in aviation. Her campaign, supported by medical professionals and airline unions, had led to more comprehensive health monitoring systems for flight crew worldwide. "Tom's legacy," she often said, "isn't just about what happened that day, it's about preventing it from happening again." The incident had also influenced how airlines approached passenger briefings. Beyond the standard safety instructions, crews now emphasized the importance of staying calm and following directions during emergencies. Some airlines had even started including brief messages about the professional backgrounds of their crew members, helping build passenger confidence. In his personal life, Big Shaq found that the experience had changed him in subtle ways. He took more time to mentor young professionals, sharing not just technical knowledge but wisdom about handling pressure and responsibility. His business meetings often turned into impromptu discussions about leadership and crisis management. One day, while visiting an elementary school career day, a small boy asked him if he was scared of flying after what happened. Big Shaq's response reflected the deeper understanding he had gained: being brave doesn't mean never feeling scared. It means knowing that some things are more important than our fears. The Simulation Center had become a hub for innovation in emergency response training. Researchers studied how different professionals reacted under pressure, using the data to improve training programs across industries. The findings challenged traditional approaches to emergency preparation, emphasizing the importance of adaptability and emotional intelligence alongside technical skills. 1 year after the emergency landing, Big Shaq found himself in an unexpected situation. He was back in the air, but this time as a passenger on a flight to Singapore for a global aviation safety summit. The summit would mark the launch of an international emergency response initiative that had grown from the seeds of his experience. As the aircraft cruised at altitude, he couldn't help but notice how things had changed. The pre-flight safety briefing now included information about the crew's experience levels and emergency training. Passengers seemed to pay more attention, understanding that safety wasn't just the crew's responsibility, it was a shared commitment. The summit itself was a gathering of minds from various fields: aviation professionals, medical experts, technology innovators, and safety specialists. Big Shaq Simulation Center had become a model for similar facilities around the world, each adapting the concept to their local needs and requirements. During his keynote speech, Big Shaq shared something he'd never spoken about publicly before. The hardest part wasn't the landing, he revealed. It was the moment right after I stepped into that cockpit, seeing Captain Parker and knowing that everyone's lives depended on what happened next. That's when I realized that all our training, all our preparation, isn't just about procedures, it's about being ready for that moment when everything changes. His words resonated deeply with the audience, particularly with a group of air traffic controllers from different countries who had implemented new protocols based on lessons learned from Flight AA-2473. They had developed a system for rapid response to in-flight emergencies that incorporated civilian expertise more effectively. The summit also featured a special presentation by a team of medical researchers who had been studying the psychological aspects of emergency response. Their findings showed that the calm, professional handling of the AA-2473 incident had not only saved lives that day but had also prevented long-term trauma among the passengers and crew. During a break between sessions, Big Shaq met a young pilot from Brazil who had recently handled her own in-flight emergency. She had used the protocols developed after AA-2473, successfully managing a complex technical failure. "Your story taught us that it's not just about what you do," she told him, "but how you do it, with clarity, composure, and compassion." The technology developed for the simulation center had evolved in fascinating ways. Virtual reality systems now allowed trainees to experience various emergency scenarios from multiple perspectives: pilot, crew member, air traffic controller, and even passenger. This comprehensive approach was revolutionizing how people understood and prepared for crisis situations. Back home, Big Shaq's business had transformed into something larger than he had ever imagined. The Emergency Response Training Division had grown into a global consultancy, helping organizations across industries prepare for and manage crisis situations. From hospitals to hotels, the principles learned from aviation were being adapted and applied. One evening, during a dinner with aviation veterans, an old RAF instructor shared an observation that struck home. "What happened on AA-2473 wasn't just about saving lives that day," he said. "It was about changing how we think about emergencies. It showed us that the best response comes from combining professional expertise with human understanding." The incident had also influenced popular culture in unexpected ways. A well-known video game developer had created a highly realistic flight simulator that incorporated real-world emergency scenarios, including lessons learned from AA-2473. The game was being used as a supplementary training tool in flight schools around the world. Mrs. Chen had expanded her training program to include international exchanges, allowing cabin crews from different airlines to share experiences and best practices. "Every culture handles emergencies differently," she explained during a training session. "But the fundamentals of human care and professional response are universal." Rodriguez, now a senior training captain, had developed a special program focusing on pilot resilience. "Technical skills are crucial," he would tell his trainees, "but mental strength and emotional intelligence are what make the difference in real emergencies." His program had become mandatory for several major airlines. The impact extended to passenger behavior as well. Airlines reported increased engagement during safety briefings and more positive interactions between passengers and crew. The story of AA-2473 had helped people understand that air travel was a collaborative effort between crew and passengers. One afternoon, while conducting a training session at the simulation center, Big Shaq received news that touched him deeply. Captain Parker's son had decided to become a pilot, inspired not just by his father's legacy but by how the aviation community had come together after the incident. The young man had been accepted into the scholarship program bearing his father's name. The documentary about the incident and its aftermath had premiered at several international film festivals, winning awards for its portrayal of human resilience and professional dedication. But what pleased Big Shaq most was how it highlighted the countless small acts of courage and competence that made air travel safe. As the Aviation Safety Summit drew to a close, participants from around the world shared their own stories of how the AA-2473 incident had influenced their approach to emergency preparation. Each story added a new layer to the understanding of how crises could be managed more effectively. 18 months after the emergency landing, Big Shaq found himself walking through the halls of a newly established Aviation Safety Institute in Dubai. The institute, inspired by the AA-2473 incident, represented a collaborative effort between airlines, governments, and safety organizations worldwide. Its mission was to revolutionize how the aviation industry approached emergency preparedness. The institute's main hallway featured a wall of photographs documenting significant moments in aviation safety history. Among them was a simple image of Flight AA-2473 on the Dublin runway, rain glistening on its wings. Beneath it, a quote from Big Shaq read, "Safety isn't just about preventing emergencies, it's about being ready for the ones we can't prevent." During a training session with a group of international pilots, a question from a young flight officer sparked an important discussion. "How do you maintain focus when everything is chaos?" she asked. Big Shaq paused, remembering those crucial moments in the cockpit. "The key is understanding that chaos is only on the surface," he explained. "Underneath, there's always a structure, procedures, training, experience. Your job is to find that structure and build from it." The room fell silent as pilots took notes, many of them thinking about their own potential moments of crisis. The institute had become more than just a training facility. It served as a think tank where aviation professionals from different backgrounds could share experiences and develop new approaches to safety. One project involved creating detailed analyses of successful emergency responses, breaking them down into teachable moments. Big Shaq Simulation Center in Manchester had evolved too. The latest version incorporated artificial intelligence that could adapt scenarios in real time based on trainees' responses. This dynamic training environment helped people prepare for the unpredictable nature of real emergencies. One morning, while reviewing emergency protocols with a team of safety experts, Big Shaq received an unexpected call. A commercial flight had successfully handled an emergency situation using protocols developed after AA-2473. The crew had identified a passenger with relevant expertise during a medical emergency, leading to a successful outcome. The news reinforced what Big Shaq had always believed, that the most valuable legacy of his experience wasn't the landing itself, but the changes it had inspired in how the aviation industry approached emergency response. Each successful implementation of these new protocols meant lives potentially saved. Rodriguez had taken the lessons learned to a new level. He had developed a program that paired experienced pilots with crew members from other aspects of aviation, maintenance technicians, air traffic controllers, ground crew, to create better understanding and communication between different aviation roles. "Understanding each other's perspectives makes us stronger as a team," Rodriguez explained during a joint training session. "When an emergency happens, that understanding can make all the difference." His program had been adopted by major airlines across 3 continents. Mrs. Chen's influence had spread beyond cabin crew training. She had become a sought-after consultant on emergency communication, helping organizations in various industries develop protocols for maintaining calm and order during crisis situations. Her methods, rooted in her experience on AA 2473, emphasized the importance of clear, confident communication. The impact on aviation technology continued to grow. Aircraft manufacturers had begun incorporating new features based on lessons learned from various emergency situations, including AA 2473. These included improved systems for identifying and utilizing professional expertise among passengers when needed. One afternoon, while conducting a virtual training session with pilots in Australia, Big Shaq noticed something remarkable. The participants weren't just learning procedures, they were developing a deeper understanding of crisis management. They discussed not only what to do in emergencies but how to think about them. An emergency doesn't test just your skills, he told them. It tests your ability to use those skills under pressure. That's why we train not just the procedures, but the mindset. This philosophy had become central to the Institute's approach to emergency preparation. The Institute had also become a center for research into human factors in aviation safety. Psychologists and human behavior experts studied how different personalities responded to crisis situations, helping develop more effective training methods for diverse groups of aviation professionals. Captain Parker's legacy continued to grow through the scholarship program. The first group of scholarship recipients was preparing to graduate, each of them carrying forward the values of professionalism and dedication that he had embodied. His widow attended their graduation ceremony, proud to see how her husband's story had inspired a new generation of pilots. During a quiet moment between training sessions, Big Shaq reflected on how the aviation community had evolved. The industry had always prioritized safety, but now there was a deeper understanding of how human factors, technology, and procedures work together to create a robust safety culture. The documentary about AA 2473 had sparked a series of educational programs in schools, teaching young people about responsibility, preparedness, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. Big Shaq occasionally visited these programs, sharing his experience with students who might become the next generation of aviation professionals. 2 years after the emergency landing, Big Shaq stood in the cockpit of a retired Boeing 777, now permanently housed at the Aviation Heritage Museum. The aircraft had been converted into an interactive educational exhibit, teaching visitors about aviation safety and emergency response. As his hand rested on the control yoke, memories of that fateful day flooded back, but now they carried wisdom rather than weight. The museum had dedicated a special section to Flight AA 2473, not just as a dramatic story of survival, but as a turning point in aviation safety culture. Interactive displays showed how the incident had influenced everything from pilot training to passenger briefings, emergency protocols to crew coordination. Earlier that morning, Big Shaq had received news that touched him deeply. The first group of pilots trained under the new protocols had completed their initial year of commercial flying. Among them was Captain Parker's son, who had not only graduated from the scholarship program but had earned special recognition for his commitment to safety and leadership. "Your father would be proud," Big Shaq had told the young man during the graduation ceremony. "Not just of you, but of how his legacy has helped shape the future of aviation safety." The young pilot's eyes had glistened with tears as they shared a quiet moment of understanding. Rodriguez, now a senior training director for a major airline alliance, had implemented a groundbreaking program that integrated lessons from AA 2473 into daily operations. "We don't just train for emergencies anymore," he explained during an international aviation conference. "We build emergency preparedness into every aspect of our operations." The Simulation Center in Manchester had become the blueprint for a network of similar facilities worldwide. These centers used advanced technology to create increasingly realistic emergency scenarios, but more importantly, they taught the human aspects of crisis management, decision-making under pressure, clear communication, and effective leadership. Mrs. Chen's work had expanded beyond aviation. Her insights into emergency communication and crew coordination were being applied in hospitals, emergency response teams, and even space flight training programs. The principles of keeping calm and maintaining clear communication are universal, she often said during her training sessions. The Aviation Safety Institute in Dubai had grown into a global center of excellence, attracting professionals from diverse fields who sought to understand and apply the lessons learned from AA 2473. The Institute's research had led to breakthrough findings in human performance under pressure, contributing to safety improvements across multiple industries. One afternoon, while conducting a training session with a group of new pilots, Big Shaq received an unexpected visitor. It was one of the passengers from AA 2473, now a grandmother, who had brought her young granddaughter to meet him. The child, fascinated by aviation, had been inspired by the story to pursue her dreams of becoming a pilot. "You showed us that being prepared isn't just about knowing what to do," the grandmother told him. "It's about being ready to step up when others need you." Her words captured the essence of what the incident had taught the aviation community, that safety was everyone's responsibility. The impact of AA 2473 had rippled far beyond aviation. Business schools studied it as a case of crisis leadership, medical schools used it to teach emergency response, and technology companies referenced it when developing AI systems for critical decision-making. The incident had become a touchstone for understanding how humans perform under extreme pressure. The documentary about the incident had been adapted into educational materials used in schools worldwide. Students learned not just about the technical aspects of aviation safety, but about the human qualities that make safe air travel possible: dedication, preparation, teamwork, and courage. Big Shaq's business had evolved into a global consulting firm specializing in emergency preparedness and crisis management. Yet he remained hands-on with training, believing that personal connection was crucial in teaching these vital skills. "Every emergency is unique," he would tell his trainees, "but the principles of handling them remain constant." The aviation industry had undergone a subtle but significant transformation. While safety had always been paramount, there was now a deeper understanding of how human factors, technical expertise, and organizational culture work together to prevent and manage emergencies. Airlines reported increased crew satisfaction and passenger confidence. During a quiet evening at home, Big Shaq received a letter that brought tears to his eyes. It was from a young pilot who had successfully handled an engine failure using the protocols developed after AA 2473. "In that moment of crisis," the pilot wrote, "I heard your voice from training, reminding me that calm is contagious. We landed safely, and I wanted you to know that your legacy saved more lives today." As Big Shaq prepared to retire from active training, he focused on ensuring that the lessons learned would continue to influence future generations. The Aviation Safety Institute had established a research fellowship in his name, dedicated to studying human factors in emergency response. Looking back on the 2 years since the emergency landing, Big Shaq realized that the incident's greatest impact wasn't in the dramatic moments of the landing itself, but in the quiet, daily dedication of countless aviation professionals who had taken its lessons to heart. Every safe landing, every well-handled emergency, every life saved was part of that legacy. "The sky has always been our greatest teacher," he told a group of aspiring pilots during his final training session. "It reminds us that respect, preparation, and humility are the foundations of safe flight. Remember, you're not just learning to fly, you're becoming part of a community that holds lives in its hands."